Salve, and thank you for joining me for this very special episode of 15 with Fosca. Today, on his 80th birthday, I wish to pay tribute to my father, and I start with a quote of his, which you'll hear in this podcast. To become an anti-tourist or an intellectual traveler, you must encounter the culture in a profound and not predictable pasta and pizza and Gucci and Pucci way. We have to kill our inner Italy. So that's what we're going to be talking about in today's episode, how we can kill our inner tourist and our inner Italy. I hope you enjoy listening to this father-daughter cosmic chit-chat as much as we enjoyed recording it. Thank you so much for continuing to tune in every week, and please be sure to become a subscriber so you don't miss a single episode. Grazie mille, and happy birthday, Dad. Cent'anni. Buongiorno mondo, and welcome back to 15 with Fosca, the podcast. I have here with me today my father, Professor Pellegrino D'Acierno, who is an emeritus professor. He's currently a poet. I mean, he's always been a poet, but let's say he currently dedicates the majority of his time to his poetry. I told him before we started that I wouldn't be doing a formal introduction or a list of all the things that he has done, and he still does, because it would be impossible. And I told him it's called 15 with Fosca, not 15 hours with Fosca. So I'll cut to the chase. I invited him here for a few reasons. Well, I invited him here. We're in my sister's home in New Jersey, in Cresskill, New Jersey. And I invited him here for a few reasons. One is because he's an Italianist, and he would probably will take issue with my calling him an Italianist because it's limiting, because he has written books on so many different topics that I wouldn't even know where to start. But calling him an Italianist seems redundant, but it's why reductive and redundant. But it's important for me because that's how sort of I know him, or where my love of Italy came from is through his passion for Italy and for Italian studies, etc. So emeritus professor, ignited my love for Italy, was the first person who took me to Italy when I was a baby, but who also took me there when I had my awakening as a young adult. He's here also as someone who formed so many generations of Italianists and Italian lovers and Italophiles. And he's also here because he's my father. And it's important to me on the eve, if I can say it, of his 80th birthday. I feel like I would love to we have always had great conversations, sometimes passionate and fiery, but always, I think, really great conversations that I hope we've both learned from. And I thought that it would be nice if we could capture even a little bit of our relationship on the podcast, while we also talk to our listeners about what Italy has meant to you all these years, and why, where did this love affair begin? Or where is it right now?
Well, I somehow managed to become a professional Italian, that is, an Italian intellectual. And I wound up teaching Italian studies a good part of my life, and I was blessed because I had friends with a number of great Italian artists. I was the first to give a course on Italian cinema at Columbia, and all the great directors would come to New York on the way to publicize their films, and they would sit in my class and they would address my students. So, for example, Federico Fellini came to my course, and I'll never forget, and so did Rossellini. Pasolini right? As well.
Right?
Pasolini, but Rossellini. Rossellini said one of the most unforgettable and Italian things of my life. It was back in the 1970s when things were politicized in Italy, and he said, I'm not an artist. So, non sono un artista, sono un artigiano. I'm a worker, I'm an artist. He wanted to show his respect for aesthetics, all right, rather than being a bourgeois artist. He was simply a worker.
A worker.
A worker. And his films were so extraordinary.
Oh, God.
And as were Fellini's and Pasolini's and Visconti also came. So I was very blessed in that sense. Pontecorvo came.
Wow.
And Rosie came. I was blessed. I drove them through New York, fast, as if I were in Italy. That's one of the things. I spent my inheritance to buy something that resembled a red Ferrari, and I'll never forget. I used to park it. I was living in I had a Fulbright, and I was living in a community, really a kind of Marxist or socialist arrangement. And the boss, who was a famous intellectual, came up to me and said, Pilgrim, how dare you do such a bourgeois thing as park your red Ferrari in front of our apartment? And then he came and whispered in my ear and said, pick me up at the bottom of the hill and take me for a spin. And afterwards you'll have to take Calvino also for a split. So that was part of my intellectual formation, because I became a radical through Italy. That was pre-68.
Yeah.
And I wound up teaching for my first course at Columbia, a course on Antonio Gramsci.
Wow.
The great Italian Marxist. They wanted to kill me.
I'll bet.
Even though Columbia was far to the left.
Not that far.
Not that far.
Not that far.
Was a little dangerous. And I insisted that my students think through Gramsci's distinction between ideology, which he felt you had to reject, and hegemony.
Yeah.
Hegemony, the process or the situation by which we're made to consent to the ruling class. And so I taught them how to be counter-hegemonic.
Right.
And I wanted them to be counter-hegemonic intellectuals as they went through their...
I want to ask you a question. So you're talking about Columbia, where you were formed
Yes.
as a, you went there, you did all your studies there. And
I wanted to say the greatest blessing was when Ungaretti was visiting professor, that I served as his cicerone. And that was wild.
Yeah, and I've heard lots of stories through my childhood about Ungaretti and how he had a foot fetish, and how my parents threw a party in New York and he made all the women take off their shoes.
I'm glad you remember this
Of course
story.
I do. This is all part of my rites of passage. But Dad, I need to ask you a question.
Yes.
A burning question. So we were talking about Columbia, which is where it all began for you, right? And you taught for so many years. I think so many people, I think it's, when I think back on my career, my 23 years at Stanford, and I think, wow, like that's a lot of students, but you taught for so many years.
Yeah, and in different departments.
Right. So hold on. Let me get to my question. Thousands of students, all levels, undergraduate, graduate,
I
PhD
sponsored
students.
over 50 PhDs.
Exactly. So this is my big burning question for you. What was either your favorite class that you taught, or your favorite thing to teach? Because you've taught everything from architecture to Gramsci to cinema to...
I taught 101 different courses.
Right.
And now they're making a documentary. My two former students on me called The Portrait of a Dangerous Professor. I was dangerous because I was an interdisciplinarian back then.
And that was very, before it became...
My greatest pedagogic achievements, I think, was to teach Lit Hum, Literature Humanities, the core curriculum at Columbia, which I did for almost over a decade.
And you loved it.
I loved it. It was very difficult. I made a lot of changes. First of all, that was when Columbia was not co-ed, and I used to invite the young women, intellectuals from Barnard, to attend to register for my course, and so that was a thrill. And then I would always introduce modernist texts in addition to Homer and whatever. For example, I would have them read James Joyce's Ulysses, and we would read it against Homer.
Yeah.
And I would do the same thing with Beckett, and we would read it against Aeschylus and the other Greek tragedians. So it was a great learning experience for me. They said to me, the students paid me the greatest compliment that I've ever received. They said that if Lidham professors were gods, Professor D'Acierno would be Zeus.
Right. And that's actually funny because you always said that I was a head birth.
That's true.
And I always appreciated that. And the Bryn Mawr women out there will understand as we, we pay homage to Athena always. So
Right.
if I was a head
The
head
need
birth,
for women to be part of the discourse. Back then, it was just in the process.
Yeah, yeah.
Me Tooism was just beginning.
right.
Yeah. But
So
that
it was
that was the, and then the course on Gramsci, and the course on Vico, and Italian philosophy, which is neglected. When I proposed giving the course on Gramsci and Vico in Italian philosophy, these two philosophers, they were analytic philosophers, and they were totally against continental philosophy, and they said, Vico and Gramsci, this stuff is fuzzy.
fuzzy.
It belongs in the English department where they make a business out of fuzziness.
No.
Yes, and then I didn't know him. Edward Said came to my rescue, and he said, "That is the barbarism of the intellect, what you just said." And anyway, I still feel the rage that I had.
Yeah.
But then I went on to teach the Gramsci course, and the Vico, Vico. And recently I culminated my deep interest in Vico with an essay on him in the James Joyce Studies Annual. I'm very proud of. I call it Applied Vico, and it's about how Joyce uses Vico.
Which is heavy. I mean heavy like in the best way. Let's say it's heavy and heady. And I want to actually go. We've been talking about philosophers, intellectual pursuits. We've been talking about your
being
teaching.
a professional Italian now. There are things that have to be talked about that have nothing to do with that intellectualization.
I know, but I wanted to go back to something that I think is really important, which we have not talked about, which is Italy as a physical place.
Exactly.
And that relationship.
Exactly.
Because I think that, I speak of the fact that when I went, many of my guests who are expats have spoken about this, or anyone who has the kind of deep relationship with Italy that we do has had that moment, right? That moment where you got there and it was just the magical moment, okay? Where you just felt like everything made sense and this is what it was all leading up to. And it was that really true moment of, awe, okay? So I want to go back to Italy as the physical place. And I want to know about your relationship. I want to know about
Now, let me say that I have this concept now, and I try to embody it myself, which is to become an anti-tourist or an intellectual traveler in order to counter the culture in a profound and not predictable pasta and pizza and Gucci and Pucci. We have to kill our inner Italy, all right? Because it's a product of commodification, a product of the simulacrum, the product of whatever, TikTok, whatever. And it's that Italy that we have to move beyond. And we do that by encountering Italians in a profound way.
Exactly.
And Italians are difficult to encounter. I'll give you two stories, all right? I'm in Naples, I'm doing research for a book, and I have dinner at this elegant restaurant, and there is this beautiful Italian couple, and they start interrogating me. And this is a very Italian thing. They were testing me, and they use what I call a cafone radar. In other words, to see whether I am...
if you got it or not.
Yes.
They were testing you. Exactly. They were putting you to the test.
And to see whether I was a redneck
or a professional Italian.
Or an ugly... exactly. Or an ugly American.
Right.
They wanted to test me out. So, after this wonderful dinner, they say, please come to our house. We want to give it to you to ensure that you write a beautiful book on Naples. And so they put me up. They moved out of the house. I could. It was such a
When
risk.
was this? I don't think I've
Yes,
ever heard this story.
this was such a risk. Yeah, it was back, I don't know, in the 90s or whatever, when I was, and it was for me, because Naples is very suspicious. It's it's a dangerous place in some sense. I first finished a book called Delirious Naples. Naples is delirious, Italy is delirious and exorbitant. And that is, it refuses easy interpretation, and yet calls for them. Yeah.
So you had this totally, you were
incredible
tested, this beautiful
random
encounter,
event.
very Neapolitan.
And it's very Neapolitan, but also very Italian.
Yeah, the hospitality, what I was talking about with Lee, the warmth.
The Greeks had a word for it, Xenia. Italians, and I have all of these random gifts, including a kiss when I was in
Dad, can we keep it,
Well, this
well,
was okay.
it's just a kiss.
Lucio was there.
All right.
No, and we were at this fancy.
Lucio was there, so
we're
that
fancy,
gives it legitimacy.
And a beautiful woman from the next table. We're having this raucous conversation. She comes up and randomly bestows a kiss on me. And so I take that as one of the random encounters that Italy blesses us with.
Yeah.
That's part of its exorbitant. It's being out of the predictable.
Yeah.
Yeah. And anyway, but that Venice was a life-changing moment for me, because I had to decide whether to take a leap to go to a house of strangers.
In Naples.
In Naples.
In Naples.
And it was a very Neapolitan thing, because they're very generous. They have the caffè sospeso.
Yeah.
And so.
No, explain it, because maybe not all of our listeners
it's one of the things. One of the ways of understanding. Yeah, when you go have a coffee, and you have enough money, you buy one for a stranger who may show up. All right, and so
it's called the caffè sospeso, the suspended coffee. It's a beautiful, extremely poetic image, and I want to get back.
And it's a sign of the generosity of Italy in general.
Yeah, and I think in particular, in many ways, the South. But I want to go actually to the North.
I must tell you about the North, because I taught it in Venice.
That's what I wanted to talk about. Can I ask you questions about Venice? Okay, because I want to say that I've always loved about you that, for me, at least for me, and I don't know if you've experienced it this way as well, but let's talk about this for a second. For me, when I go to Naples, even though Florence is home for me, and it's been my home for a long time now, over 25 years. When I go to certain places in Italy, though, they feel equally homey. And I have 3 places in Italy, well, at least, let's say, that make me feel that way. And all 3 are thanks to you. One is Rome, because that was the first place, really, I went as a college student. I've talked about it in my first podcast. And that was a real summer of awakening.
You visited me when I was a
you were a fellow
at
the
American
Academy. Exactly. Yeah. So it was really stimulating. It was a real blessing. I got to touch the Sistine Chapel ceiling with you. We had a wonderful, it was a magical time. And then
we went to see all the Berninis.
Yeah, it was absolutely mind-blowing. Yeah. And then, Naples, for me, we went together on that during that same summer.
We went to Capri.
Yeah, but Naples. I'm talking specifically about Naples, because when I would go to Naples, mostly for work, I often went with Stanford students, but I also went other times sort of on my own. But the smells of Naples and the way people are in Naples always makes me feel like I'm here in the States.
Yeah.
That feeling of warmth that I get here. I love the conversations and random encounters I have, especially, anyway. So
I love the songs of Naples, especially Roberto Murlo, who is overlooked now. Yeah. And it needs to be refound.
Well, maybe we'll come back and we'll do an episode on that.
I tried to bring him to America, to convince him to come to America, but it didn't work out because he was involved in a scandal. So.
Well, let's not talk about his scandal. And then let's talk about Venice, because Venice is sort of it's perfection and in its imperfection. And have this very strong relationship with Venice. And the first time I went with you that summer, I hated it. I don't know if you remember. You probably don't, but I remember very well. It was hot. It was, I thought it was smelly. It was too crowded. It was tourist stricken. And I also remember, you probably don't remember this, but I slipped on the floor of the Caffè Florian because I had on, I don't know, like sandals. It had rained, or it was there was acqua alta. I don't remember. I did not like Venice. And then you started doing, when you were teaching at Hofstra, and you started doing this J-term class. And so you would come every year, and we would have this ritual where we would meet in Rome. And then we would come up to Florence. We would spend New Year's in Florence, and then you would take Giada,
we would
my
go
daughter.
on a spree.
Yeah, we would go on these great sprees. And when my daughter was a baby, you were,
she was 4 years old. No, was it 5? And she went. The crazy gondolier, after he sang his aria, asked her to get on the stern and to row
the gondola. So we always had a lot of adventures all over, but I would say Venice then spoke to me in a way that it never had. So J-term, for those who don't know, it happens in January. And so here I found myself, and we would have these trips every year. It became, every year you were teaching, and you did it for many years. We would meet in Rome. Right after Christmas, sometimes we would do Christmas also in Italy. It depended, but most of the time we would meet up in Rome, have fun in Rome, spend, family time, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day in Florence, and then you would spend about a week babysitting Giada before, you would have to go up to Venice to start teaching while I was still working, and she did, she was out of school or daycare or whatever. And then those trips to Venice in January completely transformed me into this.
I would put you up at the Albergo Flora.
Yeah, the Flora.
Which in name of, it's a Ruskin type hotel.
Which I still recommend to my clients, the Hotel Flora. And I fell in love with it in the cold and in the foschia. Hold on. And then I ended up with a man from Treviso, from the Veneto. And and it's one of, those beautiful serendipitous.
It's called synchronicity.
Yeah.
According to Jung.
So talk to me about your relationship with Venice. You're working on a book of poetry right now. You're finishing up a book.
It's called Anti-Haiku Moments and Profane Illuminations, the Exorbitance of Italy. It should be perhaps the exorbitance of Venice or the madness of Venice.
I'm trying to get him to shorten the title. I think he should start with the exorbitance of Italy, because I'm thinking more about, our world today, where everything is sort of dumbed down. But anyway, talk to me about
Venice is an enigma. And you have to learn how to experience it in a non-touristic way, in a philosophical, a dialectical, profound way, where you encounter its enigmas and its dazzling illuminations. You have to kill, as Regis Debray, kill your inner Venice.
Okay, so how does a person like me, like, how do I kill?
One of the things is learning the philosophy of walking. Okay, the piazza is the key space for Italy and for learning Italy. You have to learn how to cross the piazza. I wrote a book of poems called 13 Ways of Crossing the Piazza, which is about the impossibility of crossing it. And I found it to be the piazza because you have to do gaze work, you have to do all sorts of body work to understand what's happening in the piazza. But comprehend. I found that Jung had this notion of the circumambulation of the self, and so that was for me a metaphor for understanding. So the circularity of it is the way of finding and losing. You find yourself by losing yourself, by threatening your predictability. That's what you have to be an anti-tourist.
Okay, so
you have to refute we live in the culture of the simulacrum.
Yeah.
All right. The culture generated by the internet and AI and all that jazz. But so you have to, and that's what Venice is the greatest thing. It's the greatest lesson in learning how to get lost and stay lost in the labyrinth of 100 profound solitudes. And you have to, something that the tourists avoid because they have the guided tour. Fuck the guide, excuse me. Screw the guided tour. Forgive
Oh
me.
no, I'm gonna have to put a warning label on this. But wait, I help my clients do very special guided tours. Please, no, but but this is
they're
important.
proper
That's what,
guided
yeah,
tours.
because I give them people who I know are gonna be anti-tourist. I give them really unique experiences.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to go back to just very quickly, but it's very important, is in a city like Venice, like I had that experience that first time that put me off so much. So how can a person going to Venice who wants to kill that tourist notion and approach to Venice do it in a city like Venice that is so inundated with tourists? When you can't,
you have to kill your.
But how?
But because you don't want to have the
how do
fabrication.
you physically do it when you have all of that around you? How do you do it when you're sweating and you're online in front of San Marco?
I would say one of the things to do. Well, a number of things. Engage Venetians. I used to pass on my hotel when I was teaching there, and I would come out and go to the right. There was this fancy boutique, and all of my colleagues were too tight-fisted to go in there. I went in there, and we started talking about that elaborate, what do you call it, frame, the way they paint or draw frames. And we had this wonderful conversation with this fellow who, like Rossellini, said that he's not an artist, he's an artisan, artigiano, un operaio.
Lavoratore, un operaio.
Yeah, and we had, and I told him that, they do this elaborate kind of
like, what is it, gilding?
No, they have a name for it. I can't remember.
Engraving? I don't know what you're talking about. I'm sorry. We'll remember.
Yeah. Anyway, and so I said that I'm a poet, and that finding that graffito underneath is part of my aesthetics as a poet, and so we had this in common. And then, so this is a fellow I didn't know.
Yeah.
And so then I said, I have my young grandson, all right, who was 14 at the time or whatever, and I'd love to give him a souvenir. What would you suggest? And now this is a real Tony place, a real pricey place, okay? Mm-hmm. So he went back to his archive, and he brought me this winged lion of San Marco, dated 1860, from the time of the Garibaldi shirt. And it was incredible, gold and whatever. It must have cost $500 or more. And he gives it to me and says, "Here, you take this."
Wow.
And this is the kind of thing that happens in Venice, okay, and in Italy.
Yeah.
It's called Xenia in the old Greek word. It's like the cafè.
Sospeso.
Sospeso. It's these acts of random generosity.
Extreme generosity as well.
Extreme.
The exorbitance.
So can you imagine, this was the exorbitance.
The exorbitance.
So I was thrilled by that. The other thing is, I would tell you have to become an aesthete in the most rigorous sense of that. You have to become, familiarize yourself with the aesthetics, for example, of Tintoretto. Tintoretto, the great rebel, and you got to understand the madness of Venice. You forget the guided tour, forget the predictability, forget Renaissance geometry and perspective. You've got to deal with. Tintoretto realized he was, as Sartre pointed out, he was the first movie maker of all time. He was making movies by doing those enormous paintings of his, and so that would be typical. Other things, the architecture, of course.
And the food. I mean, you taught
right.
that food class. You taught That was a memorable, and this is, those are things that I've always thought about because as someone who was also, I wasn't teaching, but I was working with Stanford students, and I always loved that class because I saw as the years went on how students changed and how experiential learning was so impactful for them in a place like Italy, so culturally impactful. That food class was phenomenal.
Well, thank you. Food is quintessential for Italians. They perform these operas, food operas, and you have to get into the swing of things. All right, and also you have to. It's part of the cafone radar. You have to be to understand food. It's like picking out a proper tie or a scarf in Italy. They count for everything. Yeah. Okay, because it's whether you make the bella figura or not. Yeah. The same thing happens at food, and with your palate. They have this notion of aristopiatti, aristocratic plates or dishes, and you have to develop it. I when I'm in Venice, I do several things that try my way of becoming an anti-tourist. I try to find the best bottle of
Amarone. I knew it.
Right? Yeah. But if I don't have enough money, I get Valpolicella Ripasso. That's why I outfox the sommelier.
Many times you've outfoxed the sommeliers.
I go for Radicchio Treviso, which
is we know the best in the world, as is Prosecco.
Exactly, and I do all of these things that I have nothing. I'm not a food tourist. I'm not a foodie, but I'm a connoisseur, which means I have to master the protocols of Italian culinary art. Yeah. Okay, and I have to develop a certain kind of taste. It's like a taste for a beautiful woman. Mm-hmm. You have to recognize what beauty is. Right. And the same, it's not difficult. It's difficult in a place like Venice, which is enigmatic. Yeah. And it refuses interpretation.
And tricky.
It's the city of obstructed meanings. It refuses to yield, and yet at the same time it demands interpretation. The meanings that and that's what I think the way to become an anti-tourist. Yeah. A philosophical voyager.
We're very much in sync, and so Jung would be happy because I really wanted to go back. Well, I wanted to, because we're coming to the end of our time, believe it or not. I mean, we have a little more time, but I wanted to address...
Under the time of this interview, but not in terms of life.
No, not in terms of life, Dad. Don't be silly.
We're eternally linked.
Yeah. So I was thinking about two things. One was I do want you to talk a little more about the poetry you're writing now about Venice and why, sort of why Venice. Okay, that's one part of it. Then I really do love this notion of killing one's inner tourist and killing. I think it's also sort of killing one's preconceived notions of things.
That's it.
And all of the,
you got it.
Right? And so just to also be with what you're looking at. And I want to just quickly say something. I was in New York with Jada the other day at the MoMA. Yep. One sec, Dad. One sec, wait.
Okay.
And I was trying to show her around the MoMA, and it was incredibly crowded, and it became incredibly difficult and bothersome for us because I was not able to experience the art, and it really bothered me. And I realized the same thing happens obviously in Italy. So I go to Venice, I want to see that Tintoretto painting, but somebody is standing in front of it, taking a picture of themselves in front of the painting. And it upset me so much because it was interfering with my gaze, my experience. I couldn't look at the art. Yeah. And so I wanted to talk about that because I think there needs to be more anti-tourism in the world right now. Right. So I want to get back to how we can do that. And then I want you to talk a little bit about the Venice poems because they are so special. Okay. And you're working on them right now. Right. And so I want it, maybe you'll even recite those couple of lines that you've been...
One of the things that the traditional tourist is not respect for others. Okay, and I think that's one of the things that we need to educate tourists to be respectful of others, otherness, culture of otherness, and to respect the culture of otherness. You have to be able to read its aesthetics. Read its text. All right. You have to read its architecture. All right. You have to read, or you have to access the madness of Tintoretto. Why would one go to Venice without becoming mad? And the way to become mad is to encounter the paintings of Tintoretto. Anyway, let me tell you about my poems, because I'm very proud of them.
As you should be.
They're called Anti-Haiku Moments and Profane Illuminations, the Exorbitance of Italy. That's a tentative title. But what I tried to do, since Venice was the crossroads between the East and the West, I tried to use an Asian form, the haiku, 3 lines, 17 syllables, to encounter Venice. All right, but what happened was, Venice is too mad, too exorbitant to fit into the 3 lines of a haiku. So I kept losing.
That's why you keep saying, I can't finish this. I can't finish this. I was thinking it was taking a long time, and I was wondering why.
Let me give you an example, okay? It's the first one, and it's about the, what is it? This, I don't know. Anyway, 3 stunning women exit the Café Florian, the most elegant cafe in the world. Lines in a haiku, their shadows right. The title is The Beauty of Silhouettes. And so there, give you an idea. Anyway, I do something idiotic throughout. Humor is eliminated from haiku. You're not, and from anyway. But I have them at a certain point. I say that haiku are comparable, or the formal equivalent of cicchetti. Cicchetti are those little snacks that
they're like tapas in Venice, right?
Exactly. And so I write a poem about that. Let them eat cicchetti. Let them eat haiku. Anyway, yes, but Venice has given me many poems. Many beautiful moments.
It's so inspiring. It's such a magical city, but not for those obvious reasons. When I think back to my best memories of Venice with you, many of them center on food, but I have to be honest.
I remember.
And wine. There we go. We're making Young happy again. But it's actually some things that people might see as mundane, like when we would find a very special artisan and buy a beautiful piece of jewelry for my sister or for my mom,
that artisan that I used to take you to is famous.
No, but Venice has great. That scene, incredible, vibrant artistic scene.
And now it's being abandoned by its people, and yet there is this class of artisans and of workers who are committed to Venice. And Venice needs
I think
to
even
stay
more
alive.
so. I think people are so invested in Venice emotionally, and it's just such a beautiful city and such a special.
Well, that's the ultimate leap in becoming an anti-tourist.
If you move to Venice,
or if not, you dedicate yourself to its life.
It's life.
Venice has to live.
And it's survival, really. And I think that that's important, because Venice is probably the best example of over tourism.
Yes.
Uber tourism in this
nonsensical
moment.
Commodification by tourism.
But then so we have a responsibility, right? And there are ways that you can be, as you were saying, of respect. I mean, it's a question of being respectful and being open to
and of making
a culture.
The bella figura.
Right.
You have to when you go to the basilica, you have to dress properly. Okay, they don't let you in.
That's
if you
right.
don't dress.
You have to cover your shoulders, and you can't wear a short pair of shorts.
And so you begin to learn to become an anti-tourist by practicing the bella figura and avoiding the brutta figura. I I just tell you one adventure. There was this countess, a very aristocratic woman, who was there with a pooch in her, a Carpaccio dog
Yeah.
in her arms. Did I tell you this story?
I love this story, but I'll let
And
you.
so we're waiting at the for the vaporetto, and all of a sudden, the dog. It was a long queue. The dog jumps from her arms and gets on the vaporetto, and disappears into the distance. The vaporetto started.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so she was desperate. She was like the woman in the clay, the mad woman. And all the people, the Venetians, they tell the driver of the vaporetto, the navigator, whatever,
To stop.
to stop and to come back, please. But he didn't do it. And so that was it. She lost the dog. I don't know whether she found it or not, but it was this Otello. The dog's name was Otello.
Really?
What? Yes.
Othello. It was
Why?
just so Venetian.
Why did you abandon me? Why did you betray me? And that was a moment that stayed with me in my life. I forever. And there are a lot of those moments of Venetian gifts.
Okay. So we really are at the end of our time,
Right.
but I hope that we can do this again. I loved this.
I hope I wasn't too boring.
No.
I hope I wasn't too edible.
Oh gosh, we might have to cut that out. But as we come to the end,
Too Jungian.
too Jungian. That's better. I feel better about that.
Okay.
Is there anything you want to ask me? I've spent a lifetime asking you questions. Is there anything you want to ask me? I'm asking Fosca.
Are you happy in Florence? Have you has it opened up its arms to you?
I am happy in Florence. I think I've been the more I reflect upon it, I realize the way I say it to Jada, who's my daughter and your granddaughter, obviously you know that, but maybe our listeners don't know. But for me, Florence.
You've got to see my granddaughter.
Oh no! Stop! No, please. This is
like
no.
Claudia
She doesn't
Cardinale.
look like Claudia Cardinale. Dad, please. This is so embarrassing. We're probably gonna end up cutting this whole part out, but no, I'm Florence is home. I always say home is where, home is where my loves are, and I have a whole bunch of loves. I have loves here too. That's why I was saying, it's hard I'm happy in Florence, but there's always a part of me here. And when I'm here, there's always a part of me in Florence. But I've been extremely fortunate because, a lot of people don't find Florence or Florentines easy. And I've been blessed because, my best friends, my closest friends are Florentines, if not Italians. I also have there's a nice international community. A lot of my friends are from the world over, including the United States. But I feel that Florence is so, it's home. And I love where I'm living and I love my life.
Let me tell you my story.
Oh, Dad, but we have to end.
Well, this will be 2 minutes.
Okay.
2 seconds.
All right.
So I'm there at the bar Antinori, and I became...
Please don't use names.
Okay.
Antinori is fine to use, but don't use the name of the person that might be in this story. I think.
I'm not going to mention the person. And I became friends with the waiter over the years. I would be excessive, in my
tipping,
being a sommelier manqué, and he would always give me glassfuls of wine that were
abundant.
Brimming. Yeah. And so I go there with this fellow, Count. And we're there, and I ordered the wine, and he pours it. The waiter, who honored me, and anyway, and the Count says to him, "I thought that you poured brimming glasses of wine. What happened?" And so he committed. This was a Count who should know. Better. The bella figura, committed a brutta figura. And so so from that point on, the waiter poured me only normal size glasses of wine. So again, it's all has to do with the bella figura, the brutta figura, the art of living, the aesthetics of living. You have to be, in Italy, you have to be aesthetic. Yeah. Okay? You have to be all right, creative. Even, especially in your human relations, you have to be creative. and especially love. I love Italy is the country of love, and you have to know how to love, and that is a rigorous task.
It really
No
is.
task for tourism, for tourists.
I think that is a perfect way for us to end. So thank you. You're
Thank
laughing.
you,
Why are you
daughter.
laughing?
My beloved daughter.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. Grazie mille.
My darling daughter.
Thank you. And thanks to all of you for tuning in again. Grazie mille. Alla prossima. This is Ask Fosca, your U.S. insider in Italy, signing off for now. Thank you for listening, and I hope you'll continue to join in on our conversations. Please also check out my website, askfosca.com, and follow me at Ask Fosca on social media for updates, news, advice, and upcoming podcasts. I would also love to hear directly from you, so DM or email me your topic suggestions for future 15 with Fosca podcasts. Grazie mille e alla prossima volta. Ciao ciao.